Hey guys, Carlos here from My Family Flight Plan. Today I want to talk to you about something that happened to me about a month ago on my flight back for my annual. I made a mistake, and it was a pretty serious one. I starved my engine from fuel, and I had an engine out not too far from my landing site here at Reed Hillview. It was a pretty scary moment. Some pilots might think it's a non-event, but based at the altitude that I was at, and also I think my mental state at that time, it became a much bigger deal. So looking back at this flight, I think the mistakes really started on the ground. I was in a rush to get home, and I started making sure I got my pre-flight. It was starting to get a little bit dark. I still had plenty of sunlight, but I had that in the back of my mind of I need to get home. I need to get home to see my son's performance. And, that starts playing in your mind a little bit. I wanted to make sure I got the pre-flight done thoroughly. At the same time, I was struggling with time, right? So I did feel a little bit rushed. It's mistake number one. You should never really be putting yourself in situations where you feel rushed to do anything, especially in an airplane like this, because, maybe looking back, I've always been a safe pilot. I always feel like I'm being a safe pilot, but realistically speaking, when push comes to shove, sometimes you have some trust in the airplane, you have trust in your abilities, and you rush things. If anything, it's a reminder to never rush. This is an activity, a hobby, a privilege that we have to give it its respect, and we have to take our time in terms of ensuring that the full flight is safe from beginning to end. So that's mistake number one. I would say always take your time, even when you feel rushed. Don't put those odds against you, and really take the time and effort to ensure that you do a thorough pre-flight and make sure you're fully ready before taking flight. Mistake number two is I put a lot of odds against me in this particular case, right? The time issue, the time getting darker. I also had my son's performance. And so then you have this aspect of get-there-itis. I need to get home. I need to get the plane. I didn't need to get any of that. I really should have kept the plane in the hangar at the mechanic and gone another day. I felt some pressure to get home. I knew that my wife was probably going to be a little upset if I didn't make it on time. And at the end of the day, that was a poor choice on my part. I shouldn't have put those odds against me to go get the airplane, come back, and still make my son's performance. I think I could have made that decision before leaving Reed Hillview that, hey, it's going to be a little tight. You should probably just pause and take it another day, especially for the type of flight that we were doing, right? It's a post-maintenance flight. So you need to be more diligent. You need to take more time. And I feel like I rushed it a little bit, to be completely honest. Number three is you lose a little bit, right? When you're flying or when you don't fly for a little bit. Oftentimes, these airplanes are old and they require a lot of maintenance. In my case, I was down for about 3 weeks. Nothing major, it's just we had some delays, we had some parts that needed to be shipped in, and at the end of the day, I was eager to get my airplane back. And I missed 3 weeks of flying. And 3 weeks doesn't sound like a lot, but sometimes it is, especially when you're dealing with complex machines like the one behind me. This isn't a trainer, this requires some more attention, and I could have taken out all those external factors and also given myself more prep because I knew that this flight was not going to be straightforward. Maybe not the best flight to take after a maintenance issue, right? So anyway, let's get to the incident. I was flying home. I was already pretty close to home, actually. So we were right over the Byron area. At that point, I had realized that my right fuel tank had about a quarter tank left. And as most of you may know or may not know, it's important to keep the airplane balanced. And I thought, as I've always done before, that, hey, I'm going to burn off my right tank, which is something I normally do, and I will switch to my main tank prior to landing. I usually, when I have a quarter tank, I usually set a timer for 5 minutes, and I am constantly looking at that gauge to make sure that as it gets closer to empty, I switch over to the next fullest tank or the next tank that's in sequence. I didn't do that. I didn't set my timer. I completely forgot about the tip tank. And as I was over Calaveras Reservoir, at about 3,400 feet, it's when my engine went silent. And a lot of people will say engine outs, or when you starve your engine, it's not a big deal. I would agree if you're at higher altitude. In my particular case, I was at 3,400 feet, pretty much parallel with the top of Mission Peak. And all around me, there was pretty much mountains, and there's a reservoir below me. I won't lie that the first few seconds of that was an oh no moment, but then a couple seconds later, a panic kind of set in, which I didn't expect. It felt like the ground was getting much larger, and I really didn't know if I was going to make it. Now, looking back at it, the reservoir would have been a perfect place to land, and especially because I have a retractable, I could have kept the landing gear up and should have made a very successful landing. But I must admit, when it happens, I did feel a sense of panic and, oh crap, like maybe this is it. After the freak out, the freak out moment, I made sure I was keeping my speed. I was trying to keep as much altitude as I could without stalling the airplane. I called my mayday. I started looking for a place to land. And next was, let's start going through the checklist, right? So I am mad at myself for this. I didn't look at my physical checklist, or I have a checklist right in front of me on my iPad actually for every flight. I didn't look at that. I instantly went to my head, and I did things a little bit out of order, as it says it in the checklist. I covered everything on the checklist, but one of the first things that it says on your emergency checklist for an engine out is to check your fuel tanks. And I did that kind of last. I started from a flow that I typically have, which is my fuel pump was on. I turned on my fuel pump. I put the mixture full rich. I checked my gauges as they're right there. And lastly, my carb heat, I pulled out just in case. Prop full forward. Actually, no, I pulled my prop all the way back, and then all of a sudden I got a lot more glide. And then I looked down, and I was like, I'm an idiot. My fuel selector was on my right tip. So at that moment, I switched it back to my right main, and engine came back to life. I would say from the beginning to the end of that whole situation took me what I can estimate to be between 20 and 30 seconds. It seemed like a lifetime when I was in there, but I'm guessing it was somewhere around 20, 30 seconds. And I lost close to 800 or 900 feet. Which, when you're at 3,400 feet and you're in a bowl of mountains, essentially, it gets pretty dicey and pretty scary. I had told the tower that I was not going to make it. They started clearing airplanes in the area and the landing site, but I knew that I wasn't going to, I couldn't glide to the airport. After I recovered, I told them what had happened, instantly told them, hey, I'm very sorry. I starved my fuel tank. I'm okay now. I have plenty of fuel, and made it back with a safe landing. The aftermath of it, I didn't feel like flying afterwards too much. I was so eager to get my plane back, and then I didn't want to fly because I felt a sense of anxiety around flying again. And then shortly after that started to die down, the weather in California was horrible, and we had fog for like a solid 3 weeks to a month, where it just was not dying down, or it just wasn't clearing up. So I didn't feel safe to go on a first flight after that incident. And so then another month went by of not flying, and that's not great. So I am now at a point where I've had one full flight under my belt, and the first leg of that flight, I will say, was full of anxiety. I meant to talk about this actually during that flight, and I didn't say a word. I was so focused and hyper-focused on everything, every single detail that the engine, every sound, all the gauges. I was just so focused and hyper-focused on making sure that flight was successful and getting rid of my nerves. And then the flight home, I started feeling like myself again. And I am now wanting to go back out and continue getting there, because I know it's going to take a little bit to get those nerves out. But after the fact too, just kind of for everybody to know what happens after you call a Mayday. So I did get contacted by the FAA. One of the agents called me and asked me if I was the pilot that had declared an emergency, and I said yes. There's a lot of questions around the fuel, the type of fuel of the airplane. We have different types of aviation gas at this airport, and I'm sure they're eager to know if it was one of those new type of aviation fuels, the GAMI fuel or the UL94. But I was running 100 low lead, so it wasn't anything different than I've ran before. The gentleman asked for my medical and asked for my last flight review, which I'm all current on, and that was about it. I did actually a day or two after the incident, I did file a NASA report as well, and pretty much explained everything I have just laid out here on this video, just to be on the safe side and make sure that I'm self-reporting the incident, since I did call a Mayday. Now, what I will say is I was lucky, because even though at the time I felt scared, to be completely honest, if this would have happened 3 minutes later, I don't know if I would have been here, because I would have been descending over the city of San Jose, and there's not a lot of landing areas in the East Foothills as you get closer to the airport. And there is an area where gliding to the airport and your altitude wouldn't have really worked. So in a way, I'm thankful. At the same time, if this would have happened 5 minutes later, I would have been in the pattern, and one can argue that, hey, you could make it, but if you're on your base leg and you're already pretty far away, as it often happens here due to the traffic flow, there's nowhere to go. So I consider myself very lucky in that sense that it happened where it did. I had plenty of time to recover, even though it didn't feel like it, and I'm here today, right? So anyways, I hope you guys learn from my mistakes. I hope my goal of this video and this channel is to be as open and transparent as I can, share the highs, but also sometimes there's lows. And I think it's important for you guys to understand and know that things happen. And if this can save one pilot from making my crazy and stupid mistake, then it's worth it, right? So anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you're still watching, if you do have any questions or comments, or if you've had similar experiences, please let me know in the comments below. I'm hoping we could start an open discussion and share amongst one another, because I can tell you that the anxiety of coming back into the airplane was real. And I don't think we talk about that too much. I am doing more of getting back on. Like I said, I've already had one flight, and I'm going to be flying with my buddy Nick again real soon, and that's going to add a sense of security, add some safety in there as well as I get back into flying. He's working on his CFI, but I might also get a CFI to fly with me for a little bit, just to get comfortable again. Again, it's been probably the longest period ever since I bought this airplane where I haven't flown. There was a 3-week period, and now it was a 4.5 week period before I flew again. I think for 2026, my goal is to fly at least once a week and stay current. But most importantly, you hear some other folks talk about proficiency. I think that's critical and very important. Proficiency I experienced through in a very real way. I was current in every aspect, but was I really proficient? And the answer to that is, well, not as good as I want to be. And so my goal is to continue to work on those things, work on emergency maneuvers, and work on stalls, and work on all these things that will help me be a better pilot and continue to be a better pilot, because a pilot is always learning, and I learned a big lesson last month. So anyway, guys, thank you for staying on. If you've stayed on this long, again, please let me know what you think, and if you want me to share these kind of experiences with you. All right, I'll see you on the next flight, and in the meantime, fly safe. Take care.